What was the most enjoyable part of watching the Bears yesterday for you?
I just think the whole operation offensively was fun to watch. I think the key for me was they won early. They won within the scheme of what Ben was trying to do, and then we got to see Ben come out. We got to see the flea flicker. We got to see some of the fun stuff that's always been accustomed to, always been a part of what Ben Johnson is as an offense coordinator, and we haven't really seen that a lot yet this year because they've been behind and they've been trying to play the game and they played the game well early, which opened up the opportunity for some of those fun aspects. And then they had success with those fun aspects as well. And so I just think it was a really good overall performance by the Bears in general. I thought Caleb played, arguably his best game as a pro. And, I watched the one in London a year ago where he threw 4 touchdown passes. But the way he played this game, I thought, you could argue was his best game as a pro. And, he's getting better and he's fighting the urge to play fast and to play out of structure. And it seems to be becoming easier for him. Still had a number of plays in this game where he was playing too fast, that he's got to slow down, whether it's his feet, whether it's his mind. But I've seen it all year long is he's fighting that and he's trying to learn and he's trying to get comfortable playing on schedule and in the pocket. And every week he seems to be a little bit more comfortable, which has to excite everybody with the Bears. It excites me as a football fan and a quarterback fan because he's so talented that if he can get that down and do those things, it could really, really be special.
A lot of people are excited, but some of us need your help in figuring out why we're excited. And that last minute of you talking about you see him fighting the urge to play fast seems to be what the whole year might be about in terms of Ben and Caleb. Tell us more about that. I saw that you tweeted as you started to look through games that Bo Nix is playing too fast this year. That's a guy that, most of us think, well, he's got it figured out after last year. But no, it's difficult for these guys to do it. Tell us, how can you see Caleb fighting that urge the way that you describe it?
So you usually play fast when you're not really sure what you're doing and what you're seeing. And so let's just use an example that if you come back and you think you're going to have your number one guy, and so that's your mindset coming out of, a play is, all right, I'm going to have this guy. And you come back and all of a sudden they take that away. And you hadn't really thought about, okay, shoot, I thought I was going to have it. I don't have it. What am I going to do next? And now all of a sudden you're going, okay, now I got to go figure out what I'm going to do next. And you're playing fast. Or if you've got a play and you have no idea what the defense is really doing. And so, you're trying to read the coverage and they rotate and you're not really sure. And so you don't know where your eyes should be on this particular play. Now all of a sudden things are going fast because you're like, I don't know what I'm seeing. It's like a blur of stuff. And so, slowing it down comes down to, understanding it so well that okay, I'm going to go to my number one. Oh, they rotated down and took that away. Okay, here's where I go with that. I go to here. Maybe that's just go to a check down. Or, it's recognizing coverages or what I have to recognize with a coverage to go, oh, shoot, I'm going to look at that safety. Oh, that safety staying back in quarters. Boom, I know exactly what my read is if he stays back. If he drops down, boom, I know exactly what my read is. And when you are in that mode where your offense so well, you can process and understand what you're seeing from a defensive standpoint. Now you can slow it down because it becomes reactionary with what you do. I tell people all the time, so you have Peyton Manning who, and I don't know, I haven't really talked to Peyton about this. I'm just assuming, knowing how Peyton played the game, I'm assuming that he spent hours and hours watching tape of the opponent's defense. And I assume that because he was so great before the snap. The best I've ever seen at playing the game before the snap. Okay, they're showing me this tendency or this front or this little thing by the safety. I'm gonna change the play. I'm gonna signal out here to this play. And And he was so good at playing before the snap that I assume that's what he studied a lot. I was exactly the opposite, is that I played great after the snap, seeing it, processing it, being able to know where to go with things, throwing my hots and handling pressure and all that stuff. And so, whereas I don't want to make the statement that I didn't study the opponent's film very much, because I did, but I studied the opponent film more from a structural standpoint, not what does this player do and what does this player do. It's what coverage do they like to play? What's an indication that they're playing man or zone or 3 or 4? They're going to drop down. And I spent most of my time, the relative most, studying my offense. Like, I wanted to know every one of our plays like the back of my hand. So when I did see something after the snap, because that's where I was good, boom, I knew right away, okay, my Z receiver is the number one, where I start my progression if they're in cover 3. It looks like they're going to be cover 3. Oh, boom, in the snap, they run back to cover 2. Oh, I know. Now my X becomes my number one receiver, and here becomes my progression from that. And so I studied my offense so much that I knew it so well that I could play reactive football, and I could use my processing to my advantage. And so, yeah, I think part of the process becomes knowing who you are as a quarterback and, what you have to study to be good at so you can play fast and you can play comfortable. Maybe that's I need to study before the snap so I can get us into the right play so I'm fully comfortable when I snap the ball. Or maybe it's I need to know my offense so well that no matter what a defense does, boom, that's my answer. That's my answer. I've got all these answers based on what they do, so I can play comfortable and I can play slow, and I'm not going to panic when what I thought was going to happen didn't happen. And that's where playing fast to me comes from. It's from you expect something and then that doesn't happen and you don't really know what you want to do next. So now it's just you're frantic and you're trying to just make a play.
Kurt, I wanted to lean on your experience as a player and someone who trains quarterbacks for a second. What's it like to teach someone after failure versus teaching them after success? Because it seems to me like even with how well they play, there's a lot of stuff that Caleb can still learn from on the tape. And might he or any quarterback be more receptive after a team win and after you have personal success?
Well, I mean, yeah, I think both sides can work to your favor. I mean, sometimes it's easier and more fun to learn after you've had success, so you're not as defensive and you can be more open to some of those things because it's like, dude, you just played great. You just got a game ball. But, here's a couple plays that, man, if we do this differently, and you're like, oh, okay, yeah, great. But, everybody loves you. And so it's much easier to accept that, as opposed to the failure. Now there's the other side of it where I'll just use a technique thing. So I'll see these, crazy talented players, Caleb's like one of them, that can get away with bad technique with their feet because, they're able to make some really good throws with their body and do some unique things. And so, if you've had success after doing something wrong like that and you made a great throw, sometimes I think it's harder to get a guy to go, hey, yeah, you made a great throw, but I don't want you to do it like that. I want you to change and have proper technique so you can't miss that throw the next time. I see guys all over the league that, make those throws so they kind of stay in that world and think they can get away with it. And I think it becomes harder at times to teach them through some of those things because they are having success and, they may not think it's that important because I can make that throw. But I'm going to let you know when you're under pressure one time or when you're trying to speed it up and you do that, you're going to miss. So I think, both sides can be true that sometimes it's easier to learn, when you fail. So like if I go to make a throw that I should make every time and my footwork's terrible and I miss the throw, I'm going to be much more apt in that situation to go, yeah, I got to get my feet right. Yeah. Show me what to do so I don't miss that throw. So I think there's both sides of the coin and the key is always as a player to stay coachable no matter what. Coachable whether you've had success, coachable whether you've struggled, coachable whether you've had success for a long time, or so coachable whether you've had success, up to this point in your career in college and everything. Stay coachable in every situation if you've got guys around you that can help you, and that's the way you become great.
Kurt Warner with us here on Spiegel and Holmes on 670 The Score. After the Bears scored the touchdown in the 2-minute offense just before the end of the first half, they showed an angle after the extra point of behind Caleb of a big play he made to Luther Burden down the field. And you could see, watching from behind him, the tiny margin of openness that you, the NFL quarterback, have to see and have to trust, and you have to be confident. It was so, I mean, it's unbelievable what you have to trust. It's like, I don't know if people understand, and I think I certainly don't when I sit here and get critical sometimes. Like, how do you trust that? How do you learn to believe that it's the right throw to make even when it's not there yet, and it may never actually show itself until the ball gets there?
Well, first, I'm glad that you say that, and I'm glad you got to see that, because it is an incredible job to see that and to play that way with as fast as it goes and the athletes and stuff. And then the second part of that, I will say that for us, when you get to that level, those little windows you see seem huge to us. I can remember the conversation I had on the first throw that I made. So Trent Green got hurt in that preseason game back in '99, and they brought me in that preseason game, and I threw one pass in that preseason game. And I remember coming back, and it was a big in route that I threw, and threw the pass, and I didn't think anything of it. It was like, okay, yeah, that was easy. It was there, the read was there, boom. And the next day on film, Coach Martz brought me in, and he goes, "Hey, Kurt, why did you throw this?" And I was kind of surprised because I'm like, that was easy. It was open. Like, well, I don't understand. But when he showed it to me on film, I saw how tight the throw really was. And, so I went through my process. Well, I saw this linebacker, and the linebacker turned his hips to the right, so I knew he couldn't cover it to the left. And, so then it was just kind of an easy throw right there in that hole. But it was an indication to me that, like, even high-level coaches and, when you watch on film, you realize sometimes how tight some of these throws are. But when I went back and when you're playing, because you've gotten so accustomed to playing in the speed, some of those windows just seem huge. Like, there's no way I could have missed that. There's no way I could have missed that throw where, normal people that don't play look at it. And I'm glad that you guys are kind of wowed by it, because that is the sport. And that's what, when the great ones become great, they do, they're so good at their craft that little windows seem big, right? They seem like they can't miss that window because it's so easy. But it's, it's high level thinking, it's high level processing, it's being able to kind of expand that vision, through understanding and spacing and doing it so much that, that it looks big. But I know the throw you're talking about, I thought it was a great, read by Caleb to go through his processing, because if he's a half a second late on that throw where he threw it, he probably can't throw it because it's jumbled up in front of that. And so, so you saw a number of those things from Caleb yesterday that get you excited, because, I thought week one was okay for the most part. I said it wasn't a terrible game with what was available to him. Week two was even better, doing more. And I thought this one was better than that. And so you're seeing progress with what Ben wants to do and how they want him to play, and growing as a pocket quarterback each and every week. And then to get a win on top of it, I think was huge.
Speaking of progress, Rome Odunze now has more touchdowns this year than he had all of last year. The numbers in every category for a receiver are up. I feel like beyond the numbers, I'm seeing a guy improve. What are the things that we should look at when looking at Rome Odunze and saying, hey, there's a wide receiver who's becoming something?
Well, I think you could say the same thing about wide receiver that we're saying about Caleb. is that the game, when you can slow the game down and start to play the game with your mind, that's where you start to win. I've always said this about wide receivers. Wide receivers and defensive backs. Like when you're playing against each other, patience wins. The guy that can be patient, if you're the guy jamming the wide receiver, and you're impatient and you go try to jam him and you miss, game over. If you're a receiver running a route against press coverage and, you're afraid you're going to get jammed or you're afraid he's going to, shorten you on your route, you speed everything up, defense wins. And so the ability to be patient running routes is where the great receivers are great. And that's what Rome was so good at in college. Last year, he was playing faster than that. He was running through his certain part of his breaks or double moves and doing everything too fast. And so it wasn't as if he was bad. I mean, he was still a fine receiver, but you can't take the step to being great until you can slow it down. And again, part of that is just your mind being able to slow down because you've gotten accustomed to the speed of the game and the speed of the guys that you're playing against, and you're starting to understand the nuance. And that's what I see from him this year. Is that's what they expected from him when he came out of college because he was so good at it in college. Last year, I don't think you got to see it to the full extent because he was a rookie. And, we often say rookies or players make their greatest jump from year 1 to year 2. And it's primarily because of this. Because right away, it's fast and a lot's coming at you, and you're learning these pro offenses, and you're seeing different coverages and rotations, and oh my gosh, it's like a blur out there, and I'm just trying to run my 10-yard out. Like that's all I'm focused on right now. And then you get to the point where it's like, okay, now I start to understand how to set a guy up. Now I can see it, and it doesn't seem as fast. And so all these little nuances that I've had in my bag, I can pull those back out. And that to me is what I'm seeing with Rome is that, now he's starting to use those tools that he has, and he's slowed the game down in his mind, but he's playing fast with his body. Kind of what I was talking about with, that analogy as a quarterback is that everything's fast and the window looks small to you guys, but to me, it looks big because I've slowed that whole thing down. I think Rome is doing that as a wide receiver. And so you're starting to see all that talent and skill come out and show up on a weekly basis.
I'm so glad I asked you that question. Outstanding, as always, Kurt. Thank you. We appreciate you. We'll talk to you next week.
Okay, sounds good, guys. Take care.